pergunta se Deus criou o universo, eu digo à pessoa que a pergunta não faz sentido. O tempo não existia antes do Big Bang, então não houve um tempo para Deus criar o universo. É como perguntar como se chega ao fim da Terra. A Terra é uma esfera que não tem fim. Então procurá-lo é um exercício inútil. Cada um de nós é livre para acreditar no que quiser.
And it's my view that the simplest explanation is, there is no God. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate. This leads me to a profound realization. There is probably no heaven, and no afterlife either. We have this one life to appreciate the grand design of the universe. And for that, I am extremely grateful.
Einstein never achieved his goal of a theory of everything. But again and again, others have thought they were on the brink of this ultimate achievement. This was always wishful thinking. Until recently. A revolution occurred in the 1980s. In universities across the world, new ideas in science streamed forth. Finally, it seemed, everything in the universe was about to be explained. In Britain, the famous physicist Stephen Hawking was even so confident he claimed physics was ready to read the mind of God. There would soon be no big scientific problems left. One idea was the most revolutionary of all. It seemed a surefire theory of everything, and captured the imagination of scientists like Bert Everett. It was all to do with string.
It has been thought since physics began that matter was made up of particles. We have changed that point of view now. We now think that matter is made up of little strings.
For years, it had been an article of faith that all the matter in the universe was made of tiny, invisible particles. Now, suddenly, the particle physicists discovered they'd been studying the wrong thing. The particles were really tiny, invisible strings. The theory was called string theory, and it maintained that matter emanated from these tiny strings like music.
You can think of it as a violin string or a guitar string. If you pluck it a certain way, you get a certain frequency. But if you pluck it a different way, you can get more frequencies on this string. And in fact, you have different notes. Nature is made up of all the little notes, the musical notes that are played on these superstrings.
All of a sudden we realized the universe is a symphony, and the laws of physics are harmonies of a superstring.
String theory was so provocative and downright weird that it immediately began to sound like a perfect theory of everything.
It certainly did sweep us all by storm. It's a beautiful, elegant, and simple theory. And a number of people said, well, if it's so elegant and simple, why don't we try to use it as the basic unifying principle for nature?
Imagine you could find an explanation for everything in the universe. From the smallest events possible to the biggest. This is the dream which has captivated the most brilliant scientists since Einstein. Now they think they may have found it. The theory is breathtaking, and it has an extraordinary conclusion: that the universe we live in is not the only one. For almost 100 years, science has been haunted by a dark secret: that there might be mysterious, hidden worlds beyond our human senses. Mystics had long claimed there were such places. They were, they said, full of ghosts and spirits. The last thing science wanted was to be associated with such superstition. But ever since the 1920s, physicists have been trying to make sense of an uncomfortable discovery. When they tried to pinpoint the exact location of atomic particles like electrons, they found it was utterly impossible. They had no single location.
When one studies the properties of atoms, one found that the reality is far stranger than anybody would have invented in the form of fiction. Particles really do have the possibility of, in some sense, being in more than one place at one time.
The only explanation which anyone could come up with is that the particles don't just exist in our universe. They flit into existence in other universes too. And there are an infinite number of these parallel universes.
Interesting you use the word philosophy, because, for example, one obvious question which arises, which is, why should we behave well to each other? Why should individuals do good things if it's all purposeless, if it's not benign, if we're going to end up however we... As one scientist, Richard Dawkins, put it, the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference, which has a huge moral dimension to it. Why should we behave well?
Well, look at the way Einstein looked at the question of divinity and morals and ethics. Einstein said there really are two types of God. One is the God of prayer, the God that you pray to, the God that parts the waters, the God of Isaac and Moses and Jacob, the personal God. The other God is the God of Spinoza, the God of design, the God of harmony. Einstein says something very profound. He said the universe could have been chaotic. The universe could have been random. The universe could have been ugly. And yet we have this gorgeous synthesis at the origin of the universe itself, giving birth to the galaxies, the planets, DNA, life. And Einstein said that the harmony he sees could not have been an accident. That we're not talking about the design of humans. We're not talking about an intervention that gave us eyes, noses, and ears. But where did the laws of physics come from? I work in something called string theory, which makes the statement that we are reading the mind of God. It is based on music, little vibrating strings giving us particles that we see in nature. The laws of chemistry that we struggled with in high school would be the melodies. The melodies you can play on these vibrating strings. The universe will be a symphony of these tiny vibrating strings. And then the mind of God that Einstein wrote about at length, the mind of God would be cosmic music. Music resonating through this nirvana, through this 11-dimensional hyperspace. That would be the mind of God.
One of the basic, I suppose, principles of the discussion that we're having and of your book is that if mankind is doomed in this universe and mankind has to find an escape strategy, then mankind's got to be a lot better and smarter than we are now. You talk about type 1, type 2 and type 3 civilizations. What do you mean by that?
We physicists look at outer space and we catalog very advanced civilizations by type 1, 2, or 3. Type 1 would be a planetary civilization that controls the oceans, controls the volcanoes and the weather. Type 2 controls stars. They play with stars. They eat up stars for breakfast. Type 3 is galactic. They roam the galactic space lanes. Now, by contrast, what are we?
Well, nowhere near even type 1, are we?
We're type 0.
Failures.
We get
In the inflationary theory, the Big Bang giving rise to our universe is likely not a one-time event. Instead, the fuel not only generates our Big Bang, but it would also generate countless other Big Bangs, each giving rise to its own separate universe, with our universe becoming but one bubble in a grand cosmic bubble bath of universes. And now, as we meld this with string theory, here's the picture we're led to. Each of these universes has extra dimensions. The extra dimensions take on a wide variety of different shapes. The different shapes yield different physical features, and we find ourselves in one universe instead of another simply because it's only in our universe that the physical features, like the amount of dark energy, are right for our form of life to take hold. And this is the compelling but highly controversial picture of the wider cosmos that cutting-edge observation and theory has now led us to seriously consider.
Me sondas, conheces-me, mesmo quando falho, eu sei me amar. Estás presente a me cercar em todo tempo, em todo tempo. Eu sei me amas, eu sei me amas. Prostro-me diante da cruz, vejo o sangue de Jesus, nunca houve amor assim. Sobre a morte já venceu, sua glória o céu encheu, nada irá me Tu és meu guia, meu protetor. Diga, tua mão me firma. Tua mão me firma. Eu sei me amas. Eu sei me amas. Prostro-me diante da cruz, vejo o sangue de Jesus, nunca houve amor o sangue de Jesus.